and they were, and it was like people were so interested. It was a wonderful, engaging dialogue. So I came back to our board and said, can we talk to these people and have something similar again? And just have the DNR that can talk to us a little bit about, from law enforcement perspective, what they're seeing, what they're thinking about, issues, and then open up the questions. So I'd like to introduce Amanda Weaver and Rich Stowe and say thank you very much for spending time here with you guys. They were a little, I guess, Lake Ann this morning. So maybe you heard some things that were of interest there, and you can see if they're of interest here. But thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Good morning.
Depends how late I work tonight. We're just gonna go over some real basic things. As I'm assuming you all live on Platte Lake. Okay. So basic things that some riparians have a question about. We're not going to talk about riparian law because anyone who's ever dealt with that knows that there is no black and white answer to any of that. But what we do run into, jumping right in, is what you can and are allowed to have as riparian owners: a raft, a dock, a mooring buoy. Does anyone moor any vessels in there? No, and I don't remember seeing very many moored vessels, if any. I transferred to Benzie County last July, and you may find this hard to believe, but I was a little bit busy between the harbor and the rivers, so I didn't go out and look for moored vessels a whole lot. So those are issues that occur evidently on other lakes. Swim buoys. Swim buoys are very specific. They have to fall under the uniform marking code, and you have to have a permit for swim buoys. So any buoys I can say this with pretty good confidence. I've lived on a small lake for about 35 years, and I grew up on Northport Bay. So everybody has a tendency to put out buoys that don't go. So the reality is, by the letter of the law, a raft, a dock, and mooring buoys. Other than that, you're not supposed to have them unless they're permitted. And we permit swim buoys like the boat launch. If you lived adjacent to the boat launch, you would certainly be within your rights to apply for swim buoys to protect the people in a high volume area. We don't have any channels. The river might be the same thing, might be applicable there, as long as it doesn't hinder navigation. And that's the whole, I always have to say this, not that anybody's going to do it. There'll always be someone else or your neighbor, but we have run into issues because you are allowed by law to have a swim raft. Well, that raft needs to be in a reasonable distance from your property. Because there are laws. The reason for all these there are laws that pertain to, 100 feet flown away from your raft. Well, so people think, well, if I put that raft out there a quarter of a mile, that's going to cover it. No, that's where we have to be prudent. And if it's not, if it hinders navigation, then we actually will inform you, and if you don't adjust it, then we'll remove it. That's never happened. Everybody always seems to be very good about it. But I have seen it before where someone complained about a raft, and I thought there was an island involved. And there's only one navigable channel, and they moved their raft right out in the middle of it because they didn't want people water skiing out there. And they thought, I don't think that's what this is doing. So enough of that. Any questions on that at all?
You use the word reasonable. Is that defined? Like how many feet or what is reasonable? Your discretion?
It would be wonderful for our careers if that was defined.
If the water's 3 feet deep in front of your house and you want to swim or dive off your raft, and if you go 50 feet from your dock and it's deep enough to swim and all that, then I think that's probably pretty reasonable. If you take it out another 100 yards because you're trying to, or 100 feet trying to control the boat traffic, then I don't think it's reasonable.
Is that true of moorings too? Is it reasonable?
Moorings, if it's deep enough to moor, you have to, if you're going to have a mooring, which I don't think anybody does, that mooring, yeah, reasonable to an extent, but most people want to moor as close as they can with enough water. I don't know if there's any real large sailing vessels or anything that have a huge draft. That's why the moorings on the bays turn into an issue. Because they have to get out so far, so. I think you're just gonna have to trust us on reason.
The reason I ask is there's a mooring, I'm assuming that it's where it is. It's a cement block with looks like something bigger than a bowling ball on top of it. That's probably 150 yards offshore in front of our place. So I try to find it every time I go out. It's not a navigational problem because, you know, it's about 6 or 7 feet of water. But I'm wondering, how the heck did that ever get there? Would that have ever been a mooring location? Because it's way offshore. Right. Like I say, about 150 yards off of the south shore. But unless there was a really big sailboat with a fixed keel that needed at least 6 feet of water or something, I have no idea why it would be out there.
Where on the south shore is it? Where is it? There's that whole shallow portion for quite some ways on the south side.
It's toward the east end. I don't know how to describe it. You know where the gravel pit is on Platte Road.
Yeah.
A little bit further east of that.
Okay.
Nobody's using it,
Right.
but I'm wondering how the heck did that thing ever get there?
It's hard to say. Someone might have thought it was a good idea to try to place it and take it out on the ice and it was too thin or something like that. It's hard to say.
That's true.
You end up with all sorts of things. So with that said, about docks and rafts and mooring and reasonableness.
Just to backtrack for just a second about who we are, for those of you, maybe everyone's familiar with conservation officers and what we do, but the Cliff Notes version is we are fully commissioned law enforcement officers. So same we can conduct traffic stops the same way Cooper can. We assist the counties with their calls, but our focus is the fish game and recreation side of things. So that's your hunting seasons for us in Benzie County. Our by far our busiest time of the year is the fall with our fall fish runs between the Betsy and the Flat. You all are locals, I'm sure you know just as well as we do the mess that can turn into sometimes. And then the recreation side. So we are equipped with boats and ORVs and snowmobiles. So our job changes pretty significantly depending on the season. But we do spend as much time as we can out on the water during summer. We are spread unfortunately pretty thin. We're the only 2 officers here in Benzie. Our area also covers Leelanau, Grand Traverse, and Wexford counties. So we do work interchangeably with partners in those counties. We have 2 in Grand Traverse, 2 in Wexford, and 1 in Leelanau. So just so you know, if you don't think we're around, we are. We do the very best that we can, but we do have a large work area. So as much as we try to be everywhere at once, it's not always possible.
Yeah, you won't catch us on general patrol a lot, but you've been on Platte a couple of times already this year.
Times this summer, and actually that's more than any other lake I've been able to give attention to. So we have things like yesterday. I had every intention of grabbing my boat and being on the water. And then for those that heard about the incident down in Manistee, we had an active shooter, and I ended up down there all afternoon. So we what we do it changes dramatically depending on the day.
And just so I don't know if patrol time came up in the pre-questions to this or not. There's the 2 of us, and that's a full complement. Benzie County is a 2-officer county. That's it. We're not gonna have 6 or anything in the near future if they hire some more conservation officers. The county will have a couple of Marine deputies. And that probably isn't going to change. And the fact that there's 110 lakes and all this Great Lake shoreline in Benzie County, that's not going to change either. So that gives you a kind of a perspective. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. We end up, working complaints and stuff, but I haven't had any complaints. And I came last July, but I haven't had any real complaints. Maybe some set lines that weren't set lines, but
I've been assigned to Benzie here since 2019, maybe 2020. Started with the DNR in 2017 up in Leelanau County and transferred a couple years after that. So been around for a few years. But
basic marine laws that we see probably need attention, and that some people don't, and with the river coming out of Platte Lake probably are an issue. So
life jackets. Please, please, please spread the word. If you're in a kayak and a canoe, you are legally required to have a life jacket on board. the way I equate it is that's your seatbelt on a boat. Safety is one of the things that we take a pretty hard stance on, because it's something inevitably every year we end up dealing with the drownings and the recoveries, and that's the last thing. I'd much rather issue you a citation for not having a life jacket and you'll remember it next time than be dealing with the other end of things. So please, if you're kayaking and canoeing, a lot of the times those vessels get overlooked. They're not, you don't think, oh, I'm just going to be out on my kayak, I don't need a life jacket. That is not correct. You are legally required to have one. Please make sure that you do. Yes, sir.
It'd be just a cushion.
For that type of boat, yes. If it's under 14 foot, the seat cushion suffices.
At that point in time, that's considered type 4 personal flotation device.
But do make sure that it is actually the type 4 Coast Guard approved, because I have seen people with these foam pads that they think are the seat cushions. They're not actually Coast Guard approved life jackets. So if you use the cushion, that's perfectly fine, but just make sure it is a Coast Guard approved life jacket.
I have a question about on a boat. Do you have to have a life vest for every single person on the boat? And can it just be stored, or does it have to physically be out on the boat?
So it depends on the size of the boat.
Okay.
What size boat are you referring to?
22 foot.
So you would need a wearable life jacket for everyone on board, and then you need one additional type 4, which is either your throw ring or your seat cushion.
Okay.
So a 16 foot is the cutoff. So if you have a 16 foot boat or larger, then you need a wearable for everyone on board, in addition to your throwable. So you need both.
Can they be in compartments? And not just out.
The law says accessible, but we've checked enough boats, especially larger pontoon boats. I don't think anybody ever gets ticketed for that, but you'll always be reminded that it needs to be accessible. And I can only say that, has anyone ever swamped a boat ahead of holding an emergency before? That's not a good time to start looking.
Or to have to take them out of the plastic that they come in. Or take tags off.
We actually do all the charter boat inspections and inspections that are applicable to us, the deliveries for the Great Lakes. And we see it all. And I've seen on checks on the water and checks in our inspections. This is beautiful. It keeps your life jackets nice and organized and all that. So one person, if they're lucky enough to grab that, is going to survive. You're not going to unzip it.
Yeah,
And
keep them in the big storage bags, which is what he's referring to. Great in theory, but when things hit the fan, that is not the way you want it accessible.
And unfortunately, that's, we've seen the results of that. And I don't want that to happen to anybody here. So just keep that in mind when you're storing things. You have to store them. You can't, if you have a dozen life jackets on your pontoon boat, where's anybody going to sit if your life jackets are sitting? But so accessible as much as they can.
Okay.
Okay, I have a different type of boat, a single person sculling boat. My wife has it, and it's very difficult to wear a vest. It interferes with it. So we've been trying to think of what can we have, because it's a 17 foot one, but they're very narrow.
And
so
then
you
put
have storage.
So,
Skulls, everything.
I wonder, because I booked Lake Leelanau sometimes too, and they never had us wear life jackets.
Unless something has changed in the recent past, and no one's ever asked that question. Because my neighbor,
I know one who's going to be stumping us today.
my neighbor wrote, and to the best of my knowledge, those are exempt.
But an option, if you still would like to err on the side of caution, what I wear for patrol, and you're absolutely right, having something that inflates is not always the best way to go. I think you do have one of those. I can wear it weird, but it's you're doing it. But sure, but it would be, I would think that would be the least hindering option.
Well, the other option is I'm following her in a little boat.
Everybody.
But that seems, that's why.
It is,
That you-
and
that
actually, that probably wasn't going down that. I mean, a year ago, it was all these, I know it's hard to believe, but I've been doing this for just a little while, more than a year. And no, someone brought that up, and I thought, that is interesting, but I had never seen anybody rowing that had one on it.
Yeah.
And I don't know where in the world you'd put it.
There's no
Place.
Was there a present for stumping this week?
I'll just pull big in.
But on the flip side, in all seriousness, and we're talking to concerned people here, and all the marine tragedies that I've been to, none of them involved anybody, even though we do lose some to hypothermia and so on. But by and large, it's no fear.
They were not wearing a life jacket.
And having it and wearing it are two different things, I know. And sometimes you don't have to. And we lost a 22-foot fishing vessel in Lake Huron one time when I worked over there. And they both survived. One of the guys must have been an Olympic swimmer, because we always tell people, do not swim. Well, he didn't have his PFD, he swam, and he made it. And the other guy, I think, had a PFD and a cooler. And he held on to the cooler, and the cooler held air, and that's how we found him. My partner found him, but they both survived. But he said that boat went down so fast after it took they were like 6 footers. I don't know why we were out there, but I certainly would have been out there fishing. And he said that boat went down so fast. That's what he means. Stern down, he says, right down, it was gone.
Wow.
So it can happen. So that's kind of a soapbox on PFDs, but it's a huge issue on the river, and which is adjacent to where you folks live. And if you don't think, I think nobody thinks they can drown in the Platte River.
Oh, that is false.
Oh,
What about cowboys? I mean, there's even those on.
So
They're out
they are, the way it breaks down is that they're deemed legally as water toys right now. They're not deemed vessels. So because they are not considered vessels, they are not required to have a life jacket with them. I would personally absolutely love to see that change. And if you come aboard, I would highly recommend bring a life jacket, please bring a life jacket. But from a legal standpoint, from a law enforcement standpoint, they're not required. Any other questions as far as life jackets are concerned? Yes, sir.
I went back to docs, but
Sure.
whenever you're,
No, we can circle back.
okay. What is the, someone was telling me one time that depending on the length of your dock, how many like shore stations or boats you can have on it? So many per.
that's an association.
That's an association.
How this zoning ordinance thing, no, 2 per dock.
2 per dock?
Lake Township, yeah.
Oh, Lake.
I would assume that zoning is the same.
And then what about edges of, can you put it on your property line, or does it have to be in so many?
That's a simple issue.
So, just.
That's why I said we're gonna start talk about riparian issues. We don't deal with riparian issues because that's the hypothetical. Your bottom lands are the hypothetical pie-shaped piece of land that goes from your property line, which you've all heard before.
Right.
And so we have no magic wand to determine.
Stay the same with size of boat and length of boat, the dock, it doesn't matter.
From a law perspective, no. If there's local ordinance, then that's up to the township, but
Just
no
curious.
state.
Thanks.
And how close you get to the property line is how well you want to get along with your neighbor. And like putting your deer blind on the property line. Except hopefully you're not shooting a deer off your dock. Other laws, navigation license.
The length. How far out can they extend? Is there any kind of, I mean, reasonable, obviously, but I'm just curious.
I've never seen a dock that was intrusive. They talked about them, I know they talked about them on Long Lake, and then it became a township issue again. As to how much dock they were gonna allow this individual to put out. And whether it was going to hinder navigation. It's with us, it's all about hindering navigation. If you don't hinder navigation, you're utilizing your bottom lands in a way that you're allowed to do. It's just strange. I'm assuming if you put a 1/4 mile of dock out there, someone's going to see something. But I don't know how much I'm sure everyone remembers the real low water days out on East Bay. When you went around there. I don't know how long this was. Some of it unbelievably long. So it probably would turn into a township.
I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm thinking that would.
And I have another question. And don't get me wrong, I love fishermen, The ones that come at 2 o'clock in the morning and they have these great big huge LED bar lights. Oh, yeah. They don't shield. They're supposed to shield them so that they can run down and use the lake. But they don't shield them, and they come within probably 25 or 30 minutes.
And they shine on your house.
And they're not, and again, I love fishing. But my husband went out and said, you know, this, because you guys can, and they were not very kind in response. So we're not quite sure how to handle that.
We have no real laws. That's a reflection. What you're getting is a reflection of the lights pointing down in the water. What they think, all they can see is what it's doing in the water. They never seem to look up, because years ago, my neighbor, she was convinced someone was casing every house on the lake. And I thought, what in the world are you seeing? And then I watched them one night, the goldfish.
Right.
That's what it did.
Yeah. But the lights are actually, they're LED bars,
Right.
and they're not reflection off the lake. They come right off of the boat. This is not a reflection situation. This is, it is, and they're large.
They need to tip them down.
Okay,
But they can also run them underwater. Does the
Right.
same thing.
right, right.
So just because I've had fielded a lot of these complaints before, actually, some of them were from flat. And Green Lake is another one, or maybe Green and Duck. But, in that case, they were shining down and reflecting, and that's what they were doing in the Lake Island.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I mean, I know it's really hard because obviously it's just you two, and so if we call, you know, I mean, I originally called the sheriff's department,
Right.
and they said that they wouldn't come out because they said it was legal, but I said, wait a minute, it's legal to have the lights, as I said, shining down, but these are not shining down. These are like bars that are this big and have 6 or 8 lights on them. And it's very intrusive.
It is, but I don't know that it's against the law.
Okay,
That's the problem with a lot of these things.
right.
That
And
can
when
when
these-
they shine your houses with it. Those are illegal.
It's intrusive and it's stressful.
Yes, it
you know,
is.
like,
It is.
you wanna-
Absolutely.
It is.
I'm not agreeing with it, just so you know. I'm just saying that we're held,
Right.
we're always more than glad to talk to them. I preach that to everybody, because we get people calling, talking about the legality of goldfish.
Right.
And I said, yes, you can do it. However, be cognizant, because you're gonna be shining these houses.
Right.
Unless you're careful, do care and caution. And a lot of these people that are really into it,
Yeah.
they have them underwater. They submerge them. And they've submerged lights for fishing for years.
Oh,
Whitefish
absolutely.
carrying and all
What
that.
is the basis of what they're doing? Are they looking for long-nosed gar, or what type of fish are they?
Everything but game fish. Yes, gar, suckers.
That's
what they're
coming for.
Carp.
Do they?
They do. Yeah.
And read in my living room. Literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Open a book, I could not believe it. I know they had to see me.
Well, the only exception, you may not get this on Flat Lake, I don't know, with the lake I live on, the fish walleyes the same way in the late fall. And when we don't get ice early, the colder it gets, then they start spot fishing walleyes, the spotlights, and that's different too. It's like, because usually everybody's gone, it's pretty quiet, and next thing you know, it's
Like, yeah, like, yeah.
what's going on? So, yes, it's not pleasant, but I don't know.
So we need to change the law then. If we change the law, well, you know, when I'm retired, I tell people I'm retired, what the hell else do I have? Right?
I'm all for it.
I mean, if we somehow are able to do that, then you guys could enforce it then. Because it is different. I mean, within the last 10 years, you get these LED lights that are just so bright.
Oh, yeah.
They're so bright. And, you know, I mean, you try to be kind and you try to point it out, but they're not always, you know. They were not very kind, I could say that to my
Well, that
husband, so,
unfortunately
yeah,
can be common, but
right,
if you want to
Okay.
push something to get lights the light has to be submerged. Because like I say, that's not new technology.
right, right,
People,
oh, I know.
people have been sinking headlights from
Yeah.
homemade rigs
But
and
the
headlights
LEDs
for
have
years.
been around a lot, they're really becoming very invasive, the LEDs are, they're so bright, they're so.
They're bad enough going down the road.
Well, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, so, okay, well, I just want to know clarification on that.
Is there any opinion or mindset, and not official, but unofficial within the department that they might be supportive of making a regulation where those lights have to be submerged?
You never know until you ask. I've never asked my first question.
Well, we've never asked that question either, so I don't know, I can't answer your question. We wouldn't know until somebody brought it forward, and the Natural Resources Commission is receptive to hearing opinions.
It would go through plus it would go through, we can certainly run it past our fish biologist, who is in charge of all fish, all things fish in this region, and run it past her, see what she said.
Because there's enough people in enough different lakes that you've heard it many times, and I'm sure the local sheriff's departments have. It's a borderline nuisance, or in some cases it is a nuisance, depending on how they're deployed.
Has there been a lot of night fishing?
Last couple of summers.
Every time it's calm and clear, yeah.
And they come really close to your.
It's another one of those things that the popularity is just went skyrocketing.
Yeah.
It wasn't so many years ago when there were very few people that parked up.
Oh,
And now they're building, now you can buy boats. A lot of these modified flat bottoms that are rigged with the apparatus.
Maybe there's light pollution. That would fall under.
That's a possibility too.
Never know. Anyway.
Okay, so I figured I would ask you, so I appreciate it though. I appreciate it.
Oh, yes. I skirted around it as well as I could.
You did a good job. You did a good job.
That's a good question.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Floating laws, docks and rafts, what we do. There.
We ready to talk about bears?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Bears notoriously have been a problem on, I don't want to say problem. They've been around on Dead Stream Road for quite some time. We successfully trapped one last year, relocated it, and it's a possibility that it somehow found its way back. Not 100% sure, but it's a possibility. We did have a trap set this year for at least 2 weeks. It wasn't very long. It might have been there for 3, quite some time. We're not successful in trapping any bears that time, but it's one of those things that we ask folks, which you all know, pull your feeders, pull your garbage, pull any attractant that could possibly be keeping these bears around. The number seems to be increasing. People's tolerance seems to be decreasing, but it does take, once all of the attractants are removed, our wildlife division asks for 2 weeks before bear's behavior will actually, you'll see a change in the pattern. So they'll find another course, will find somewhere else to go. So it does take time. And what was it? A biologist told me once, and I think a teaspoon of attractant in an Olympic sized pool is enough for them to be, that their sense of smell is so acute, they can pick up on that. So the main thing is if you are friendly with your neighbors, just ask that all garbage, all bird feeders, everything be pulled. And we do set traps. You can also haze on site. We have a number of means, variety of means to do that, but you can also do that yourself, bang pots and pans. I know bears, sometimes they just don't spook these days. But the main thing is to eliminate any reason that they will continue coming back.
So what happens if you encounter a bear? What should you do? Like if you're walking your dog?
I mean, bears typically are more afraid. I know it's a cliche, but they're typically more afraid of you than you are of them.
Okay.
If it's a sow with cubs, absolutely take caution. I would go the opposite direction if that's the case, and find a friendly neighbor to call the sheriff's department. But 9 out of 10 times, I don't want to say it's not 100% of the time, but they'll continue moving on their way. We do live in their habitat as much as they live in ours. So I think every bear that I've seen for several springs and summers now, they continue meandering on their way, and I do my business and they do theirs, and it's never an issue. I don't want to say that's always going to be the case, especially if it is a sow with cubs, but I'll turn it over for your thoughts on that.
Well, keep in mind they're wild animals. I don't know anybody and has fed bears here on purpose. There are still people that feed bears. They think they're cute, and they are. They're cute right up until they're not. And somebody was feeding a bear in our region, unknown to the neighbors, and that bear The guy was deathly afraid of the bear, kept him inside all weekend. It stayed on his porch. There was no one around to help him get out. It would not leave. It would eat it. He had bird feeders too, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was someone was actually feeding the bear, not far from that. So, I mean, these things happen. And as far as bears being dangerous, they're wild animals. If you encounter one when you're walking your dog or something, I would just, you can stand your ground, be as big as you can be. If it is a cell with cubs, just try to avoid her. Just back off slowly. She'll let you know. She'll pop and she might charge you. That doesn't mean she's gonna hurt you. But they get pretty possessive of those cubs. And most times the cubs go up a tree. And then you're stuck with the bear. Then the bear she's gonna stay there until they're come down. And they're just like all kids, they're naughty. They don't just run down because you want them to. So just be careful around these bears. Please don't feed them.
Don't try to take a selfie with them.
Don't try to take a selfie with them.
Like the Yellowstone people.
Yeah.
Yellowstone. No selfies.
And I had a neighbor in the UP who had a bear. And if you have big picture windows and trees right outside of it, don't feed him on that tree either, because he had a great big bear wedge himself in the picture window.
Really?
And the feeder. And he said that glass, he said, sitting there, I was thinking, well, this is. It's a good way to end up with a bear in your living.
Oh my gosh.
And they will open doors. I mean, they seem to be more intelligent than they probably are. There's bears statewide that have opened car doors, destroyed the interior cars.
I had one rip off the truck of, well, I was young at the time, but ripped off the handle of my dad's truck camping one year. Trying to get, coolers inside, foods inside the truck, you think it's secure. Yeah, you got paw prints all over the side of the truck and door handle ripped off.
And where's John, the corridor down here in Deadstream is perfect. All animals use it. So there's always going to be bears going through there. That's a given. What they're doing when they're coming through, that's probably up to the people. And now, even in the last few years with the increase we've had, that Sal has cubs, she brings them to your bird feeder. Guess who's showing up next spring at your house, even after you quit feeding? They're gonna check it next spring.
So they do stay within a general area once they're born in an area?
To an extent, to an extent, and they certainly learn from your mother. They learn everything from their mother. So if mom hits grills, if mom hits bird feeders, I've had people take in their bird feeders and say, why did the bear still come? I said, what did it hurt? Well, they tore down my hummingbird feeder. I thought, well, there's sugar water. I think they like sugar.
Well, yeah.
Take that now. So, and a lot of it's living with bears.
Yeah.
We're not used to it. Northwest Michigan's not used to it.
Yeah, the South Shore, they can throw Denny, eat 3 pounds, if she chased a bear last year. I didn't even see it, she started barking, I turned around, and he just took off.
There you go, great resource. All right, any questions as far as bears?
Any questions as far as anything?
Well, can you talk this is about wildlife? The cougar in the area. I mean, there have been, sightings on occasion. And I'm just curious what, in a sense, really what the population is for cougars in Mezzi County or northwestern Michigan.
I think the official stance on that still is that there isn't a population. But this is in all honesty. I never tell anybody that they didn't see what they said they saw. And I was one of the officers in Presque Isle County when the first wolf was killed in the Lower Peninsula, even though we didn't have wolves. So therefore, I will stick to that. I will listen to what anyone wants to show me. I will certainly look at pictures and we will try to verify anything we find. It's one of those things.
I went to the National Park headquarters in Empire about 6 years ago, and I asked the same question, and they said, "We need to talk to Esther." And so, and she was a volunteer. She was had been walking along Old Indian Trail. She said, she was that she was walking and all of a sudden she had a cougar walking next to her for about 50 feet and then just kind of walked away. And, you know, she was, I should say she was a volunteer. She may have been employed by the park, I don't know, but, and she had a uniform, so I assume she had some official capacity. And I can tell you that Esther had now 5 or 6 cans of mace that she was going to wear anytime she went out. Because she said this was a cougar. She was calling, but of course, you know, you're a mile and a half in on old Indian trails and be well before anybody gets there. So I'm just saying that was Esther, the National Park Service.
Well, they have signs up.
And I talked to her too, and it was really interesting, because she said it was in the fall and the leaves were, you know, crackling, and she didn't hear a thing. It was so quiet. All of a sudden there's this cougar right there. And I think she said she called and said, I'm on the trail, and I think there's a cougar, what do I do? And they said, well, there's not much you can do. You gotta, you know, don't run. You're on your own. It's not like we can send somebody to help you. You're on your own. And she was totally convinced.
You know, they just, all I'm saying is they just haven't been verified. But you know, we said that for, and there's lots of reasons. I'm not gonna help what people say. I listen to things all the time. And there are animals that turn up all over the place. Many years ago, I knew a lady that had 2 of them for pets. Do I think the always stayed in her house? No, I don't. I think she let them roam. You don't know what is gonna happen. But when mountain lions show up in the up west end of the UP, it seems like they're on trail cameras all the way over to the very east end. And then they on trail cameras on their way back, because by and large, they tell me they're young males. And there's lots to eat. They're good all the way across the UP, but there's no girlfriends. So they turn around and they go back. So but they're well documented when they're in the UP. But that's about all I can tell you about that. When I see one, I'll tell you all about it. Because I actually saw a fisher in the Lower Peninsula, which wasn't supposed to be here. I've had marten tracked, which I guess we have martens probably a few. So I mean, you just never know what's going to happen. But I haven't seen a mountain lion, but I do know some very credible people who told me they've seen them. So that's what I know about mountain.
Thank you.
Any other questions for us?
What should we do if we come across an injured in like larger, you know, like a wolf or an eagle even? Who do we call?
So it depends on the animal. We have North Sky Raptor in Interlochen, which is our best raptor, well, it's our closest raptor rehabilitator in the area. There's another gentleman in Williamsburg. But those are really the only 2 that we have for raptors. So those are going to be your hawks, your falcons, your eagles, which is something that we deal with pretty commonly. And then we do have a small game rehabilitator here in Benzie, things like squirrels and rabbits. She's just starting out, so she's looking to expand her operation. It's just taking time. She needs to build some volunteers and get more up off the ground. Some animals you are not lawfully able to take out of the county to rehabilitate, such as raccoons and deer. So it's a little bit difficult for us because we don't have somebody who rehabilitates those larger species right now. So it's handled somewhat on a case-by-case basis, depending on the extent of the injury and what the animal is. But a Google search can give you both North Sky Raptors contact information, as well as our small game rehabilitator here in Benzie. Okay.
And you can call if you have questions. We'll do what we can to help you with it. But nobody likes to see animals suffer.
Right.
And if they can be rehabilitated, you know, they'll get you back to the
You know, I have a question about, we have guests that come up with small dogs. And I'm always telling them, well, you know, there's wildlife in the area, coyotes, you know, at night, and whenever the one they really get worried about are the eagles. Thinking, you know, how much, you know, not all little dogs are vicious as Denny. You know? Some, you know, I'm just thinking, what could an eagle really carry off a small dog or small? I mean, and about what poundage is they're going to be limited to? I mean, what do I tell these guests that are worried about an eagle taking their dog away?
saying I've heard of it so few times over the years. But I always thought it was a possibility. I lived on a farm in Posen with my kids. And every time we got a puppy, we had enough eagles over there. Even if it was a red-tailed hawk, you know, you have a puppy this big. Yeah. I have said, do not leave that dog alone out in the yard. And dogs this size, I would assume, I can't give you a pound that the eagle's gonna pick up. But we haven't had any complaints.
Not to say it couldn't happen, but I've never received that complaint.
I'd be a lot more worried about a coyote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
15 pounds, I wouldn't be surprised. It was a really big fish. It's like eagle pick up the fish.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't like a little bluegill.
No. So, no, but coyotes, I have had those complaints over the years. You know, all the way up to beagle sized dogs. It just depends. But they're all wild, just like the bears. You know, raccoons are the same way. Don't feed the raccoons. Start petting them or try to make a pet out of them because they're still wild, and that never goes well.
How big a problem is poaching in Lindsay?
Poaching's a broad term,
That's exactly what I was gonna
but
say.
fish poaching in Benzie is huge.
Yeah.
If you include, you know, poaching, there's the traditional spotlight, height bird rifle, out of season deer hunting. That's what everyone thinks of poaching. Yeah. But as far as over harvest and the illegal harvest of fish in the rivers during the salmon season, it's huge. Absolutely. As far as the other stuff goes, I'm not gonna say it doesn't happen because all it takes for poaching illegal activity to take place is it takes the quarry and humans. And generally where those two things exist, there's in some way, shape, manner, or form, there's poaching. So fish poaching, I think, would be a lot bigger issue here. And it doesn't hurt that over the years, you know, even when I started hunting, it was $1. That's what you got, one deer tag. And it went to 2 deer tag. And then with the opportunity to get one antlerless deer. And I hope I'm not boring you with any deer hunters. But last year it was 10 antlerless tags and 2 buck tags. So I guess unless you're just really trying to make life miserable for yourself and go out in the middle of the night and shoot a deer, there was no need.
The best way for us to curb that behavior is from information from you folks. So we do have a 24/7 dispatch center that I can get. We'd love to provide that number to all of you guys. Really, I'm sure it's a problem. I know it's a problem, but the reality is there's two of us, and for us to be in the right place at the right time to catch these people without folks like yourself providing us some information, just hey, I heard this from a rumor mill around Honor or around Platte Lake. That's something that we welcome and we truly appreciate when folks are willing to come forward and say, hey, I heard this. I'm not even sure. A lot of the times, I don't even know if there's a violation here, or I don't really know if I should be calling. We'll pick up the phone and call. We would rather get calls that we don't necessarily, there's not much that we can do than not get calls at all. So please don't be afraid to utilize that dispatch center so we can do what we can to prevent that activity from happening.
And John, that's changed because years ago, we actually ran planes at night. And we ran 5 or 6 officers and we were busy because everybody was out shining. They weren't all out shining and shooting, but shining was a normal rural activity. And but it was very active. And anymore, I don't know how many nights I spent out last fall. I never even saw a shot. Never saw any big recreational shot. So unless you, and I'm not gonna say it's not happening, but very seldom. Don't hear anything from the deputies that work all night or the troopers or no complaints.
It's pretty seldom.
Yeah, so it's that part of the poaching end is down.
Yes.
Are there any differences between the Native American fishing rights and the ones that you enforce?
Are you asking, are the laws different?
Yeah.
They are, yes.
In what ways?
We could spend hours, and we're actually not in a position to really speak on that right now because they are doing consent decree negotiations. But they have an entirely different set of laws than we do.
Well, so you can almost, it's safe to say that the creel limit will be different, the season will be different, and the method will be different. Or can be. So it's just a different, it's independent of ours. They're special rights. They're totally independent of our laws. Even though they do, a lot of them mimic our laws, maybe with a little more of a higher limit or a longer season.
Is there still northern pikes here in the looking through this?
Absolutely.
Exactly. I caught one the other day, a couple weeks ago. It's horrendous scar inside.
Well, they get, was it well healed?
Fairly well, but it was deep. It wasn't like it was like, it's pretty clear they bite each other when they're spawning, right? You see that, they're going to spring, you know, the marks over that. This was like laid open, it's like just laid open.
Well, they get hit by eagles too.
It was a big fish, and it was fun. Right up.
It could have been, it certainly could have been.
But,
Yeah, but they. And it was a big fight, but
yeah,
sometimes there's always a bigger fish in the pond too.
yeah, there's some big ones.
But they do spear. Yeah, they still spear.
How about boating licenses? We have adult children coming up when we bought a Sea-Doo. Do they have to have a license to operate that?
They do. If they were born after July 1st, 1996, they are required to have boater safety certificate.
Can they do that over online?
And on a Sea-Doo, is it
Those are the two that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is 78.
on a PWC, it's.
I just gave you the wrong
Yeah.
date.
No, that's good for general boating.
So, yeah, okay, yeah, general boating, if it were not a jet ski. If you were born after 1996, which I don't think is probably anyone in this room, you're required to have a boater safety certificate. For jet skis, it's December 31st, 1978. That you're required.
So that's been a long time.
It's been a long time. So, yes, and can they do that online? I would imagine so. Can they get that online? I would think so.
So an adult.
Are you
needs-
gonna?
Yeah, we talked about this morning, I think, because
You're gonna run a jet ski or a boat?
Oh, just.
it's one of those things that you would think a driver's license should act in lieu of that, but the way the law is currently written is it does not. So you are actually required to have a boater safety certificate and keep it on your person, so have it in your possession, if born after those days.
After.
After.
Okay, right,
Younger, yes. So
That's why I'm wondering.
yeah, they do it online. And you know, I don't know 100%. I've never tried to do it online. I believe so.
So it would be the,
Most of our safety programs are online, yeah. Even if they're contracted.
okay. Interesting. Guess I'll be getting there with them.
In Michigan, go to safety class.
There's an excellent, I can't tell you how to access it online, but there's an excellent boater safety program that the DNR offers. It has all kinds of video examples of boats approaching you from this angle, what should you do? And you can go through it and get your certification. It's really, really well done.
And that probably is why we have certain things that once you reach 16, which everyone used to get a driver's license at 16, which is why ORV laws and so forth only go for safety certificates until your 16th birthday. But with boats, like you're talking about rules of navigation, things that don't apply just because you get a driver's license. And I'm sure that was the mentality behind that. And it's like, I usually use it for people in their fire extinguishers when they don't have a fire extinguisher on a boat. So I say, where are you gonna go? If there's a fire in your boat. You can't walk away from it. It's not like a car fire or a house fire. You can't walk away because it's all water. It's the same with, you know, the importance of having border safety. And a large majority of our actions are nationwide or PWC.
Isn't it true too that there's different regulations for the big lake versus the inland lake? As far as fire extinguishers, equipment, yeah.
Not so much. When we get up to a certain, size vessel, it applies, but some of the safety stuff, the nighttime signaling devices.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is, there's a difference with some federal regulations that the Coast Guard has jurisdictional